Welcome to the Nature Photo Guys podcast,
where we talk about nature photography, from gear to our philosophies and everything in between.
So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax.
You're listening to Joe Desjardins
and Chris Gibbs, the Nature Photo Guys.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Nature Photo Guys podcast.
We are very excited to be joined by a professional wildlife photographer and biologist who has spent the past 25 years traversing the continent, chronicling the life cycles and ecological challenges of species that evoke the spirit of the wild, with a view of promoting a greater understanding and empathy for these magnificent animals. He specializes in photographing and filming the icons of the North Country. His award-winning images have been published around the globe and can be viewed as prints or in his books, which include Journey with the Whitetail, Moose, Crown Giant of the Northern Wilderness, and his new book coming this fall, Caribou, Windwalkers of the Northern Wilderness. His academic training combined with decades of photographic fieldwork have made him one of North America's leading wildlife photographers, and he is now offering an incredible intimate photo tour experience, photographing woodland caribou in Newfoundland, Canada. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Mark Raycroft.
Hey Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. It's great to see you, Joe and Chris. It's different seeing you on a screen instead of out in the field, run around with cameras, but it's a delight to be on your show. I love it. I love the passion you guys bring to your product and the knowledge. And honestly, to your listeners, two of the nicest people you'd ever meet. So
thank you. We're back at you.
On here.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I know we've had a few experiences in the field, which we're going to touch base on tonight. Basically,
where we met with
the cameras. Pardon me.
Where we met with the tire in the pothole? No, not that one.
No, not that one.
Okay. All right.
R5.
R2D2.
Yeah. And I hear you going a different way. I mean, with cameras. Yeah.
I'll just ready. Swing. No, I love the R5.
Okay, cool. Well, you know what, Mark? How about this? We're gonna let's start from the beginning here. Why don't you tell our audience how you got into photography, your career? Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of take things from there.
Sure. So we're going to skip the R5 conversation.
It's it's about 6 down on our list here. So we'll get there for sure.
You have sticky notes for tonight's podcast?
Hey, no, not like you do behind you. No.
Right?
We're more technologically inclined.
Yes.
It's on the computer.
These are bird protectors on the windows.
Oh.
My wife had this ingenious idea of putting up sticky notes, and it looks like a fun summer picnic blanket on our big windows. Our house is very bright with windows that are on either side of this room.
Yeah.
So on occasion through the years, the birds make the mistake, the odd one, unfortunately, to try and go through. So we bought the transparent decals for years that you can buy in maple leaf. There are all kinds of different shapes.
Sure.
Yep.
But they weren't totally effective. So for the love of the birds, which we for this spring through fall have had put these up. And these are I think these are new this year, and they often come up in conversation. So that's the story behind them. There's nothing written on them. They're too far for me to read.
I thought it was a new book project.
Yeah, a process or something like that, right?
All afternoon, my prep work. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. That's awesome.
I should actually do that. We've had a couple bird mishaps here, unfortunately, as well. So this year already. So that's a good idea.
Yeah,
it's hard to avoid. But you know what? Like most things, you get used to it at first, and people look at it. They come and pay us a visit and sit down. It's like, wow, look at all those colorful sticky notes. But we look right past them now. I don't know.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
There's no trouble. And again, it's worth it for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
A ton of nesting birds around our property in our house. We'd rather see them. But as far as my story, you want me to go way back? All right. So I started in wildlife photography in my early 20s. I was studying wildlife biology at university, and doing field work and working for the Ministry of Natural Resources for, I think it was 6 different summer seasons, through forestry and fisheries and wildlife, and was studying white-tailed deer. And I met a serious professional nature photographer at that time. And my job was studying the population dynamics of this localized deer herd. It was in a provincial park. It was a pre-cull study. And so the plan was they wanted to assess the herd dynamics, the herd structure, as well as there was another graduate student studying the vegetation in the forest and wanted to do a pre-cull, post-cull comparison. That was part of the ministry initiative. So I knew where all the deer were, and I had a camera. I had been taking pictures for years, but didn't have a telephoto lens, didn't have any skill set, any idea about publishing, about selling photos. I had been taking photos and basically sitting in the woods for hours and hours in my late teens, just getting close to white-tailed deer, because that was my strongest passions animal-wise at that time. Yeah. And had many encounters, but never great images, because a 50 millimeter lens doesn't cut it. You know, it brought a memory. I could see the deer in the photo, but not
for sure. Yeah.
Not anything of quality. And so I met this nature photographer, a nice gentleman, and he wanted to photograph deer. And he hooked up with me, hearing I was the deer researcher in the area, and asked where to go photograph deer. So I took him along with me on some of my routes and surveys. And that's when my kind of light bulb turned on. It's like, wait a minute, I want to be a biologist and research wildlife, because that's my passion, is everything about wildlife and on this amazing planet. But large North American mammals were closest to my heart. And going into biology, there's no guarantee, as with any job in life or any direction, where we'll end up, what we'll end up studying. So when I met this photographer, he was retired, but now doing photography full time and publishing lots, it just kind of clicked. It's like, that's possible, right? I mean, it's not something that comes up in school, in high school, and as far as careers, and it's certainly a challenging one, but it's for those who are extremely passionate about it, who are dedicated. There's a possibility of making it a career. And it was the perfect timing for me, because I was in my early 20s and didn't have any other obligations. I didn't have children at that time, or a mortgage or anything that restricted me. And I didn't have much revenue, just doing these seasonal contracts. But I did have a truck, and I camped out of the truck. And through this other photographer, bought a couple pieces of used equipment, bought a 400 millimeter Nikon f5.6 lens and the going slide film body that I could afford at the time, and took them out. And that changed what I was able to collect. I did finish the research project, but I was having so much fun taking pictures as it was wrapping up, and trying to grow a portfolio and training my eye for that kind of stuff. So that's how it started.
Nice.
Excellent. Okay. So that's how you got into photography. Now, are you still a biologist, Mark, or are you primarily a full-time photographer?
I'd like to think that once you have a degree in biology, that you're always a biologist. And if so, I have my degree in wildlife biology. So, and if anything, so I've never, after university, I've never worked as a full-time as a biologist. I just immersed myself 100% into wildlife photography.
Oh, crazy! Okay, excellent.
Expeditions, and I've specialized in certain species and their behaviors and life cycles. For those species, over the past 25 years, the experiences I've had are very intimate, and I've gained a lot of knowledge that way too. So I think, if anything, I'm not necessarily obviously collecting data for any project, but as a photographer and immersing myself in the life cycles of these animals, as far as the seasonality and the world they live in, and being out there, I feel like I've learned more. Just because of that opportunity, being a photographer, observing.
Absolutely. And it's evident in your books too. So, that's amazing.
They still require research. I'm not saying I know everything. I mean, it's fun to do. I got to dive into that stuff too, but I'm still it's immersed in the field of these species. Anyway, sorry, Joe.
Yeah, no worries. So it sounds like you started with Nikon.
Yes.
Now you stayed with Nikon all the years and just recently made a switch and then possibly a switch back, or
you can't resist.
Oh no, I can't. I just can't because I heard a rumor. So I'm just like, Mark, you got to tell us the story here.
He's been on edge for a couple of days for sure. So
I want to see what happened. Yeah.
I've always been Nikon, and it's a system that has worked with me. I don't know, had 15 different Nikon cameras over the years. And my philosophy is the best equipment, if one can afford it, will give the best results. Yeah. And I've never been disappointed with a Nikon camera. From the early slide film days, I even had like an FM2 totally manual body for slide film because the electronic version wasn't good at like -20. The battery life would just freeze up. So then you had to know the shutter. You'd have to guess it yourself on some of these settings, but and had that back then. But Nikon, I've had all the different professional bodies through slide film. Not all, but I'd skip a generation kind of thing. I didn't
for sure.
I love the gear, but I don't jump at every new one that comes out. But the last few years have been crazy, as you and your audience know.
Insane.
But sure has.
Yeah. And at some point you just have to buy something and be happy and learn it, I think. But it's because it's weird because every 6 months there's new announcements, and some of us are still waiting for the gear we ordered 6 months ago.
Exactly. No kidding, right?
This is weird tension. It's like, well, maybe do I buy it now, or is this something else? It's changing at such an incredible pace. So I switched. I did slide film for many years, probably a dozen or 15 years, a dozen, and then switched to digital on the second generation of Nikon cameras. The D2 XS was my first digital camera. I had 2 of those. And they were exciting and fun, but the quality enough, I don't believe they were full frame sensors. And it was still early in the game. And in the publishing industry, there was also this reluctance. I mean, I held off because it was a new medium that the editorial staff of all the different publications I worked with were hesitant to work with digital as well. Is it as good? And the other thing was there was so much variance in what their photographers or their contributors would send in for color profiling, for file format, for size.
For sure. Yeah.
That it was a bit of a nightmare transition to have it work smoothly. And with any job, it has to work smoothly. The proficiency, everybody has life outside of work, even though they love what they do, it has to get done.
For sure.
So there was that delay. It wasn't until the D3 with Nikon that it really kind of, in my mind, caught up with Velvia. And that's what we were using, 50 speed Velvia forever. I started in wildlife photography in the early 90s. So it was just transitioning from Kodachrome to Fujichrome because this new color came out. Joe's smirking. He's thinking something. But
I used to bulk roll, load my own Velvia. What came across right now is I can't believe we used to shoot 50 speed, like 50 ISO film. And right now I'm like, I'm at a minimum 800, 6, whatever it is ISO. Like I can't even fathom going back to 50 or 100 or, it's insane. Honestly, you just made me realize that, Mark, like as a wildlife photographer back then, shooting such a slow speed of film, it's, and you were shooting a 5.6, you said 400 5.6 or 4 or 5? 4.5.
And I was shooting a 500 f4.
500 f4 when you're there. Okay.
At that point, yes.
But even so, yeah, exactly. So, but go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, it just brought back some memories there for sure.
Oh yeah, and I won't stay in this subject area too long. But it was the D3 and the Nikon sensors. The color kind of married up with what Velvia was, but we still were limited somewhat with the ISO, but we missed so much in those days. We got stuff Velvia when it nailed it. It was fantastic. And it still is. The slides, I mean, I don't never, ever look at them, but I mean, they're just beautiful when it's exposed properly and it's sharp and it worked out. But there's so many times as wildlife photographers where we'd be camping on some trip and we'd be watching the action for the first hour and a half because there's no light yet. There's no light. We can't do it. Oh, what's happening? It's magnificent. We can see it with our eyes.
Yeah.
The camera cannot capture it. Whereas now, I mean, there's so much about photography and equipment that is just, it's hard to even put it to words, the change, the ability of the equipment. So yeah, I've been, to quickly summarize then, Nikon throughout. And what happened was the mirrorless switch. So it's kind of like this big time with switching from slide to digital. There was a transition that took a couple of years and camera companies testing digital and coming out and making it good enough in a professional realm to switch from the exceptional quality of Belvia slide film and trust it to go digital. And it also took that time for the publishing industry to gain confidence in what they were receiving, to come up with a standard of what was being received. There were publishers that might ask for RAW files, might ask for TIFF files, might ask for JPEG. Well, JPEG, are you doing Adobe 98 color profile or sRGB? What are you doing? Or what, you know, and there's just so many aspects to it. It took that time, 2 or 3 years, for the confidence in the industry to change. It's similar things kind of happen, not in the industry side, although in the camera side, in photographers having confidence in switching. And that was my situation with mirrorless, from DSLRs to mirrorless and hybrid systems. I mean, all that has been super exciting to have the capability of shooting exceptional video as well as stills in this size of camera housing. Now, it's, I don't know, 25 years I shot Nikon, and every camera I had, I was happy with. I had 2 cameras have to be sent in for work in all those years. And one was I wore it out and had to have the shutter replaced. And the other one was some kind of minor malfunction, easily fixed. So Nikon has served me well as in my career, but with mirrorless, Sony stepped up. You know, there was talk at first with Fuji, there's Olympus, Sony stepped up. I know I think you were shooting, and maybe still are. I can talk about this because I saw something on YouTube just yesterday about Panasonic. I think I saw. Yeah.
Panasonic Lumix. Yeah, you bet.
Right. And then Sony kind of raised the bar, and then Canon caught up, I think. I mean, they came out with, well, the R5 was a big deal, but I held off because I'd always had Nikon. I have Nikon lenses, et cetera. And Nikon came out with the Z or Z, depending on where you're sitting and listening to this, 6 and the Z or Z7, and then the second versions of those. But to me, personally, they didn't match up with what Sony had out, and match up enough. Well, actually, yeah, with what Sony had out, and then Canon with this R5. But I waited a year on the R5 thinking Nikon's got to come out with something, and they didn't. And I wasn't going to miss a second full year of not experimenting with this technology because of the autofocus capabilities. I mean, it's another monstrous leap in camera technology, and you know, it's amazing. It's fantastic. I've had many people say that it's like cheating, but it's so good. But it takes that step out of the process so that you can, or the photographer can focus on other aspects of what they're doing.
Fair enough. Yeah,
it eliminates that step, that time, and the percentage of images that turn out are just, you know, significantly higher than, you know, toggling around your autofocus button trying to keep with what's happening. So I had to switch, and I bought the R5 and the 1500. And I don't know how much time you want to take with this podcast.
Keep going, Mark, because you know, as you know, Chris and I both went to the R5, and like you said, it's like, I hate to use this cliche word, but it is a game changer with the animal eye tracking and just the video quality. The fact that it's a single button, you know, when you know, be able to put all your custom functions in, but when you want to shoot the video, the button's in a really good place that we could start to record right away. Like it just, everything really works, especially for somebody like me that's never really done video before, and just really kind of started experimenting with it. Actually, last year during the fall rut, I had a Lumix G9 that I was out there with shooting video and that sort of thing. So I totally get where you're coming from. So no, please continue, because we've had questions about the R5 in all aspects, in all regards. So it'd be really, really good to hear your opinion on that. So,
well, I was unlucky out of the gate. And it's commonplace now to have to wait. And psychologically, I mean, for people getting into it now, maybe this is a new norm, whether it's buying a car or a camera, what have you. There's this competitive wait scenario where in the past, retailers, manufacturers had product, and if you gave them money, they had the product and go.
Yeah.
It was that easy. But now it's almost like, will you please sell me one? It's like, come on, right? It's mindset. And so I ordered the R5 in the spring of 21, and I was hoping to have it by midsummer to learn it, because these mirrorless systems are more complex than previous camera systems as far as menu settings and programming. And it didn't arrive. It arrived. Well, actually, no, the R5 arrived. The 1-500 came at the last moment. So it wasn't until I had the marriage of the two that I could go afield. And I set them all up. I arrived in the field. I had a couple of colleagues there that were shooting R5s and had for a while. So sat down in the woods and in the right kind of atmosphere to set up a camera for wildlife photography, and went through the menu systems and listened to their advice based on their experience, and set the camera up and started photographing, and it didn't work. It failed. And I guess a small percentage, and it's electronics, right? These are complex. So I'm not saying it to knock Canon in any way, but the camera malfunctioned, and I looked it up on my iPhone, on my smartphone, Googled it, what's going on, because it had an error code. And the error code, I think we talked about it because you guys was it 50? It was something, I forget the number of it now, but it was an error on the motherboard. So I was like, well, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
So I was saved because there weren't a lot of them around. I called my retailer and I said, look, this just happened. I'm in the field. And he had one more in stock, and he's going to ship it to me the next day across country. I'm like, fantastic. Okay. I kept shooting. Well, the courier service took the week I was there for the overnight delivery to arrive. So, but the second one, so it was great. I took the defective one when we returned home back to the retailer, and he returned to Canon. So I didn't have to deal with any of that. He was really gracious that way. Nice. And took it themselves and just gave me the new one. And the new one has worked fine. It's been flawless. And
excellent.
Good.
Yeah.
What it does is, it's so much fun. And I love the silence. That's a big thing about the mirrorless as a wildlife nature photographer. We have a lot of subjects that don't care about noise, but some do. And it's just nice not to have that sound. And as much as it was always kind of an addictive, fun thing to hear the shutter, to know you're collecting images, I don't miss it. The only thing, the trade-off is there's a lot more images, because it's just
I know. And I still can't get used to that.
Yeah.
I still have the shutter noise there. My first experience with the Lumix G9 and with the silent shutter, and I didn't know I was actually taking photos because I didn't hear it. It was set up like that, and I could see my counter, like images left going down and down. I didn't know how to stop it. I'm like, oh my God. Like I tried it a few times, and like you said, you're addicted to that noise, that you're getting those images and the bursts and waiting for something to happen and getting that next little burst of images and stuff. So, I mean, obviously it's something, it's going to be a useful tool, but what subjects do you find you really need to use it for? Is it when you're in the woods for those whitetails? Like, are they very skittish to the shutter noise, or?
It varies from location. Some species are more, but there are places where we all find where any one species might be more habituated, but there are other locations where they might not be. There are
Okay.
places where, moose, we can be as close as comfortable with moose and they don't care. And there's other places I go where the moose are very jumpy. And
I
so,
see.
or any species, the first,
Hmm.
first encounter a fox,
Hmm.
how's it going to behave? And the less noise or persona or presence that we're putting out to these animals, the better, because they're going to do their thing. And especially if there's more than one animal to interact and play and do things together. So I just like that quietness. I find even animals that are used to people, not something as robust as a moose, but deer or smaller things, they stop and look when they hear that, right? And it's something they have to process and decide, well, is that bothersome enough? I'm taking off. It could be a bird.
That's right. Yeah.
Or is that okay? It's no big deal. It sounds like something else and I'll stick around. So just having that out of it. And the other reason, and this is a little bit of a side thought, but shooting with other people who shoot mirrorless, if they're on silent mode while you're doing video, that's way better for your processing audio.
Yep.
Because something magnificent. I was filming a rutting elk situation years ago. It was in one of the best mornings I've ever experienced, where it was just frost-laden breath, the steam coming off the back of the bulls. It was cold enough, and there was so much running and working up and bugling going on. And at that time, I was experimenting more with video. I bought actually, this was a Canon full-on just video camera.
Oh, okay.
And I won't say how much money I wasted on that venture. I was filming it and getting this what I thought was fantastic footage. And as most videographers know, the audio is rarely usable. But when it is, it's awesome, right? And in a situation, it's a lot less work if the bugle or the hoof pounding sounds can be just recorded then in unison with the video. All I got was there was a couple of photographers on either side of me, was just the hearing of their shutters and mirrors flapping and the cameras going off.
Yeah.
So that changes, if we happen to be in the field somewhere this fall and one of us is shooting video and the other two have silent mirrorless cameras, then there's just that chance that audio can stay with the video.
That's an excellent point, Mark. Excellent point. I never really thought of it because I've got video with shutter noise.
I got lots of video with shutter noise.
And then when Chris and I would be out shooting, we're like, okay, I'm going to do some video. So meaning don't say anything and don't take any photos, but you could be missing something, and vice versa. So that's a great point. It's something that I should probably, turn off and try and play a little bit more with that silent shutter. So
do you notice, Mark, a visual image difference between the mechanical shutter and electronic shutter when you're shooting? I know we've heard about this rolling shutter and that type of thing.
I haven't played along with both to compare.
Okay.
I haven't had any rolling shutter issues from what I've been filming on the R5.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. And basically I'm doing the same thing. Like my whole plan is to record video off the tripod and still photograph with, I have two cameras now, so the electronic shutter I think will come in handy just when I'm by myself even, right? So yeah,
in fact, I think I've only had it set on electronic shutter.
So
that's why I don't have a comparison. It's just this whole menu system, right?
Yeah.
I've been using the R5 and I'm still using the 850 too.
Okay.
So I've been playing with both. The file size is the same. And so I have seen fantastic images color-wise from R5s, lots of them on social media from all kinds of wonderful photographers where they've been edited, and I think they couldn't be any better. But I've also seen a lot of really flat images, and that comes with RAW, right? A lot of people shoot RAW, and some people like more color, more dramatic than others, and I understand all of that. But for me, it's very important as a photographer, extremely important for me. I pay a tremendous amount of attention to the style of imagery that the clients I work with prefer. And it even varies from individual clients, but I kind of have trained my eye for the color profiling that I feel is the most marketable. And I have found it a little more challenging to get it there with the R5. In the winter images, it was fantastic, and because it's a little more, it's colder. The images have to feel colder. But with springtime, it wasn't for me as easy to get it to where I want it to be as just the files as with the 850. And I mean, I love, again, this is something on another tangent. I mean, the fact that these are 45 megapixel cameras, there's so much variance in camera bodies out there for megapixel, but honestly, I will myself never go less than that again, because that file size gives you so much flexibility, not just in cropping, but I can take a horizontal image and I can crop a vertical, and that is absolutely fine for something like a calendar cover. I could never do that. You would have to make a point. One of my editors, probably 20 years ago, I sent her a submission of images, slides over FedEx. I don't know how that happened now, but 3 weeks later you hear, but she's like, why aren't you shooting more verticals for covers? It's, oh yeah, I want covers because they pay more. So it's like, so then I started shooting more vertical, but this gives that flexibility, these sensor sizes. So I've still been using the 850 because in some scenarios, I, at this point, have a bit of a bias for the color coming off of it. And I know it's subtle. I've read lots of reviews, and the percent, when you do a comparison on these camera bodies, it's very, very minimal difference. And I think you can get it there. And like I've said, I've seen pictures from the R5 from many photographers. It's like, it couldn't be any better for how it's been edited. But that's what kind of has me still hovering around Nikon. And I love so much about the R5. My mind's blown with what it does. And the Z9 or Z9 came out, and I was filming Caribou, and the Caribou had bedded. I was in an area that had cell coverage, so I sat down and pulled out my phone for a moment, only to check emails in case there's something to attend to. And this news flash came up of this announcement of the Z9. So I called my retailer. I said, it's coming out. Okay, this is the game changer. Cliche. This is potentially Nikon stepping up to the plate in enough that might get my attention back. And so I phoned him like right away, super keen. I'm like, he said, "Oh yeah, Mark, you can be first on the list." And then I dropped it. I never actually pursued it, because I that night I watched probably 4 different YouTube videos, and the reviews weren't bad in any way. But they weren't suggesting it's better than the R5 in any way. So
I see. Okay.
Here I am. And there's all thoughts of R1 someday. All that seems to be getting further away. I don't know. You hear about it, and then it's like, well, it was supposed to be 22. Now it's 23. I don't know. But the R1 could raise the bar significantly again. Who knows?
Right.
But for me personally, it was about the color. But the Z9 or Z9 wasn't, when I watched these YouTube reviews, Jared Polin, Frono's photo. He's good, right? So he had one. There were a couple others. I don't know if DP Preview, is that the
DP Preview? Yep. That's with Chris and Jordan. Yeah,
I think they did one as well around that time, or maybe at that day. There were a few, and it just made me pause, because it didn't sound like it was beating the R5. But what changed my mind was this spring. It was a combination of two things happened. The firmware update for the Z9. There was one firmware update, then another firmware. And when I, in detail, read and then watched the YouTube reviews on what these firmware updates did, it brought the camera to where I was interested in it, these updates. And that's something so new in this field, right?
Oh, for sure.
Not to get too techie or bore people with that, but just the fact that you can buy a camera and 6 months later, it can have all kinds of new capabilities.
Oh, I know.
Firmware update.
Well, and Joe and I've talked about that before. You always used to have to wait for the next version of camera to come out, right? So you don't have to do that anymore most of the time.
Well, it's good business for them. It keeps, I know they want to move product, and, there's the new models, but they can't expect people to upgrade every year or two for what they cost. So if they can,
especially with the price, yeah,
keep it viable for those serious photographers that have invested in their equipment and keep upgrading it for 2 or 3 years. I think it's fantastic. And so the Z9 was with the firmware where I wanted it to be to get my attention. And then there was this announcement of this lens, and anyway, the 800-6.3, right?
Okay.
ZPF lens. And so that combination really piqued my interest. So I ordered them, and the camera body arrived 2 weeks ago. There's absolutely crickets, hearing nothing on the lens.
Okay.
But the camera wasn't supposed to arrive. It was crickets too. And then, the call came, my retailer buddy called me, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? What are you calling me for? He said, well, your camera's here. I'm like, what?
Nice.
So I don't have the lens I want it to be with, married couple. So I'm going to pick up the new 70-200 2.8, and I have that already, but the older version, obviously, not the mirrorless. Put that on the Z9 for now, for subjects that I can use that, and then just really hope that somehow in the next 2.5 weeks
before your next trip.
Yeah, so it's not likely at all, but I really am drawn more and more to environmental portraits in wildlife and nature photography. I love that composition, and I think in our day and age, with what so much is happening globally, that having an aesthetic portrait of a grand environment with a smaller subject is ultimately more moving to the viewer. But there's also the part of me that loves the reach of a strong telephoto that is really well designed. And there are situations like that you gentlemen know about, like bear cubs, where that reach would be very nice, or grizzly bears, or if there's a mountain goat on the side of a mountain, that you can still even do an environmental portrait with an 800 millimeter when it's that far away. There's applications, or just situations, polar bears, where you're not always close, nor do not, the situation or certain species of animals or what's happening, it just might not be good. So having that reach is something my largest lens has always been a 500. And a photographer I know has had an 800 for years, and that was just kind of surreal to me. But they were so big, it wasn't as practical for the footwork I normally do in the field. And the, doing away with the tripod, aside from video, but for stills for the past 6-7 years, everything's handheld. So I don't want to go back. I mean, I'm carrying a tripod now to do video at times, but to have a lens that absolutely needs a tripod, I'm not interested in for stills. Whereas this one can be handheld. It's not any bigger than lenses I have been handholding, really. So that's what has brought me back, and I'm excited to do a season using both the Z9 and the R5, and seeing how at the end of a shooting year, where my preference is, and then decide that way. But I mean, how can I mean, it's ridiculous to think I need anything different than these cameras. But as a professional, you need more than one camera body in the field. I can tell you, we can do a whole other podcast on failed, things. You need some redundancy with every aspect.
Yeah.
Joe might have a thing or two to talk about that. Yeah.
So Mark, are you shooting two systems now? Like, are we going to see you in the field where you have one video set up and then another one for stills? Or I thought maybe the idea with the R5 was to shoot stills in video, but then I'm of the thought that, like, even this past weekend, I found a grizzly sow with 2 cubs, and do you shoot video or do you shoot stills? Right? Like, what is it? Right? And then I got some video of a little grizzly cub walking, turned, looked at me, paused great, and then walked off. And I'm like, oh, that would have been the perfect image. Okay. But I did get the video. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm finding myself, I'm torn a lot whether I should hit record or, just take the stills. It's tough for me. I'm sure it is with you or Chris. I mean, like, what do you do? So is the idea behind the two camera bodies always been one for stills, one for video? And now you got to carry a tripod with the camera and then one for stills. I mean, it's almost like we're going backwards, like we're carrying more gear when, and the weight, because I love the fact when I went from DSLRs to mirrorless, everything was half the size. It was light, I could carry more, less weights, that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Too many options.
And that's it. I mean, Chris and I, we even talked about our first rig, the R5 rig, with the monitor, and we had,
mine's changed 18 times over here, actually.
Well, and that's it. Like, and the concept behind the rig was really well, it was thought out and everything. But like we said, till you get in the field and you start using it, then you find, okay, this isn't practical. Oh, okay, get rid of this. This is useless. Oh, we need to add this in to hold this in place. This monitor, I'm probably only going to use 10% of the time because I could use, things evolve.
You just need to focus on what your goal is, I guess, at the end of the day, right? So video, photos, what's the end game?
I have the same dilemma.
Okay.
Both cameras will be doing stills and video.
Okay.
But there's that constant struggle of the situation. And every time unless it's a static environment where you can do the same lighting and situation for 15 minutes and have the opportunity to do both stills and videos and high five yourself and have win in both categories.
Yeah. That's
the best. But when it's one scenario, one thing really dramatic happens and you have to make that choice and live with it. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but we're still there. It's still fantastic to be there. And for me, I still generate my revenue more from still photos than video. If that needle starts to change more to video, then there'll be more of a priority for video. But because of marketing media nowadays and the importance to have both, I want to come out of the field with both file types, and that's really important. Then there's all that you can get into video. Are you going to do it in slow-mo? Are you going to do it in regular? What
4K, 8K, yeah,
right. So the 800 millimeter has me really excited. The mirrorless cameras have me excited for the versatility. Even the 70 to 200, the reviews on that, on the 2.8, are phenomenal, and I can't wait to start playing with that just to appreciate the crispness that people are discussing around that lens. But there's a part of me, there's so much going on. We're just flooded with so much news and information for our minds nowadays. I'm excited about the 800, but am I being silly buying such a big lens when how many years are we going to be using this gear, and before these smartphones become more and more prevalent? I'm publishing 2-page spreads. There have been magazine covers off of the smartphone. The only handicap is telephoto. Everything close kicks butt. I'm not doing a huge metal print.
No. Yep.
But the ability to quickly switch from video of any type, time lapse, slow-mo, regular video, horizontal, vertical, or the still imagery, behind the scenes stuff, and the stabilization in these now. I bought the DJI mount for the hold, and I bought the most, maybe it's 2 generations ago now. I was playing with it last fall. I put my phone on it, and I know I didn't have it set up right. I didn't have the patience. I just had it in the field and put it on, but the phone was drifting. I'm like, forget it, and just held the phone. It's fantastic. So I'm a little, it's very exciting, but I'm also apprehensive about, the amount of investment as it's, I'm justifying it as a professional because it's the tools of the trade. The best tool
for sure.
come away with the highest quality and the most volume quantity of results. But this is the 13, and I know that there are also Androids that the camera capabilities on some of those smartphones.
For sure. Yep.
super impressive. But what I'm hearing, and it's all hearsay, just like any other rumors with any brand of camera, is that, not this year, but next year, the 15 is going to have some crazy telephoto capability. And this has all changed the profession so radically. I mean, the film budgets we used to have back in the day for slide film was what made professionals. If a person was good enough as a photographer to sell enough work to be able to pay for their film and their bills and their expenses, it was a win. And that's what kept it going, because it was expensive, 50 cents a frame for Velvia by the time the shipping and everything happened. Whereas now, it's still expensive, but $5,000-$10,000, and people have a piece of equipment that it can create the world's best images in unlimited volume or quantity. And the phones are getting there. And then that's a whole other conversation, but it's exciting. The technology, like we alluded to, or you did earlier, Joe, is, it's a higher ISO, the capabilities, what people can capture now. It's tons of fun.
Oh, it is. And to your comment on the smartphones, Chris and I have been using video from the smartphones in our YouTube videos
all the time. Yeah.
And can you tell? For the most part, nobody, and it's all shot on 4K. And I use the 11 Pro. Which one do you have, Chris?
I got the 12 Pro Max.
The 12, yeah. And the 4K and the stills, I was actually doing, I was camping this past weekend, and I was just doing some slow-mo B-roll of, cooking over the fire and, just stuff and I'm taken aback at the quality. Like, I don't have to set up my R5 to do all this. It's on my phone. I airdrop it to my MacBook and I'm done. I have it all there, right? Like, I just posted a video of a grizzly bear walking down, taking a drink on our YouTube shorts. And you look at that and you would, I actually had, it was shot on the iPhone. I actually had a friend of mine ask me about this other video where you could hear, we call her Munchie Bear. It's Bear 152. She was out in the field eating dandelions. Okay, Mark. So it was that quiet that you could hear her munching on the dandelions, right? And everybody thought I was shot on my R5 with a Rode
shotgun mic
and everything. And I had sorry, man, it was like iPhone 11. It was that's how good it is, So you're right. Along with all these other tools we have, that phone does not leave my side for anything in the field. Even like just capturing B-roll, you walking, talking, just anything and everything, and to put together professional video with your phone, and it's absolutely insane. So
I think you just have to figure out exactly what the end game is that you're trying to do. There's tons of people who are just shooting with their iPhones, period. I think with the cameras that we have, we tend to overthink grabbing the other camera or whatever when the iPhone is just good enough for that job that we need at that moment in time. And I think that's where part of the problem, it just starts getting confusing. There's so many options out there. There's another brand new 360 cam that shoots 3K or 6K rather, that just came out. Makes you think, because you can actually frame up an actual image out of that, or video or whatever, and move around because it's capturing everything, right? So there's just too many things out there that are confusing people, and I jumped from Canon to Fuji because Canon wasn't ready, and back to Canon now. And I think maybe you're at the same spot that Joe and I were. You weren't comfortable with potentially what you're shooting, and you just have to go with something that you're happy with, and which is what drew me back to Canon, especially on the video side. Maybe that's what you're, with the Nikon scenario as well. You've just been used to it all this time, maybe.
It could be. Yeah, there's definitely familiarity to the system. That's a good point. My phone is actually a 12. Sorry if I'd said 13. It's a 12. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the phones too is the ease of edit and the ease of creating something that you can put out there. And I think what we do, our end game, whether it's still photography or videos, in this year in 2022, anybody who's wanting to up the level of what they're doing and get noticed is also, and it's not an ego driven thing. I don't mean it in that context, but has to create a brand to themselves. And part of that now, I mean, websites are useful, but they're also kind of obsolete because not nobody. I suspect very few people are searching out websites as a first point of contact, whereas social media platforms, for good and or not, whatever they are, it's about branding that way. And I think it's important to present both mediums because it brings more of a personality to the product of that photographer's, and not to me. I mean, I don't like, I don't want to say this, I could stay positive here. The video, the storyline, the talking of being in the field, like what you guys do, it brings a flavor to your product that is fantastic because there's a person there now. The images are great, and that still is enough if somebody's images or video are fantastic to get noticed and to move forward in sales. But if there's also a personality, it really brings that much more to the table. So the phones allow us to easily create more of a brand presence to go around the artwork that we all create. That in this day and age, I think is very relevant.
Oh, 100.
Very
I
true.
mean, there are professional YouTubers that all they do it is from their smartphone. I've watched some of these channels, and I've actually watched channels that teach you how to do that just from your smartphone, and they've got 500,000 subs. They've done it all from their phone, So I think we get a little caught up on the gear, the perceived quality, the presentation, and all that. When I think the majority of it is content and just getting the stuff out there, Like there's some YouTubers I watch, like say Peter McKinnon. I don't know if you know who he is or if you ever watched him, but he's big into, he's a photographer, but he's also big into video, and his production quality is through the roof. And it's an amazing channel. But at the same time, a lot of his stuff is from his phone, and it's still goes through the roof, and he's doing little snip, and that's kind of segue into what you're saying about social media. It's all about reels now too, video, and not so much about stills. So whether we like it or not, we have to kind of start creating more video content.
It's here to stay now. Yeah.
Oh, it absolutely is, but so yeah, I mean, there's the other thing too I was going to mention to you, Mark. Have you actually tried to take a still from a video?
Yeah, that crossed my mind about 20 minutes ago when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
It was fantasized about a decade ago that digital cameras would get there where video would be high enough quality. When red camera systems first came out, there was that idea that at 4K you should be able to pull it. There are cameras out there that the resolution is just absolutely incredible, but I've never played with any to pull it off, and I haven't. It should be doable. It really should now, but I'm not hearing that, and I've not heard of it being anywhere near commonplace that it's being done. But how is it not with the technological advances that photography and video equipment have undertaken in the past 10 years? How is it not possible? That was always the projected conversation with colleagues of mine. It was like, eventually we'd all be shooting video and you'd pick the best frame. Frame rate of these mirrorless cameras is kind of like that too with action now, right? And it's close, but it's not exactly pulling it from video.
I've seen samples on Instagram where they've actually pulled stills of the coastal sea wolves. And gentleman's name is Henrik. And if you're ever to look at his channel, again, it's only social media, it's only Instagram, right? Okay, low res files, but the imagery will blow your mind. Like he actually got these from video, and I was just like, wow. Now, Chris, explain to me what you said about the skills and the frame rate and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. The problem being, like, for example, when I'm out in the field with wildlife and landscapes, I'm shooting 8K. So I mean, it's over 8,000 pixels wide, and I could take a screen capture from there and get an actual image. The problem is when I am recording video, I'm trying to get the best cinematic quality possible. So if I'm shooting 24 frames per second, my shutter speed is actually at 1/50th. So when you have moving wildlife, there's actually motion blur, which is being the cinematic quality to, we're used to that with our eyes. So if you go take a screen capture, you're going to see a slight blur to it. Otherwise you can, bump your shutter speed to 1/4000th of a second and capture video, and you'll get a screen capture from there. But then now your video isn't going to be as pleasing to the eye and not as cinematic quality that you're looking for. So it's still a give and take. Yes, you can take a screenshot from the video, but it's just not going to look the same as the photo, in my opinion, just because of the motion blur that you're creating with the cinematic look, I guess. So
Yeah, because I've seen that in Premiere where, it takes a few seconds to remove that frame.
Well, I do it all the time for like thumbnails and all that stuff, right? So it's small little social media stuff. But if you're creating something to print, like a metal print or a big print, I don't know if you'd be as happy with that unless your shutter speed is up there. And then the video is going to be the drawback.
Yeah, so it may not just quite be there yet, but it is an option maybe for still images that you've captured through video, or that bull elk just standing there bugling, but there's little to no movement, but his head's up and a little bit of frosty breath, or something like that. You might be able to grab that because he's not running, right? At like you're saying, at 24 frames per second.
Well, if you don't have an ND filter on, or controlling the light, if you're just shooting without that, then your shutter speed is going to be higher anyway, and you probably have a better chance. But
yeah, okay, cool. No, I wasn't sure about that being an option, right? So, so Mark, if the Z9's everything you think it's going to be, is Canon on the back burner again, and it's Z9 all the way, or do you think you'll be sticking to both? Well, I guess a year will tell.
Yeah, I was just going to say, ask me in 2023.
We'll have you back on.
We'll reconvene. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitive answer and a better comparison at that time for sure. And and Chris, that was a great explanation. That makes a lot of sense, right?
Okay,
that's how video is often captured, and that limits what you're pulling stills. So yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I still have the same issue when, if I want to slow it down, well, do I shoot it 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second? When you're just focusing on video period, I do the same thing, but I'm battling in my head, whether it's 120 frames per second or 24 frames per second, or what am I going to use it for in the end game? Right. So it's still a battle, even if you're just shooting video. So, but the goal for me is to do both video and photos, and we'll see how that happens in the field. But
yeah.
So have you guys done the comparison between the R5 and R5C yet? I don't think I've seen that.
No, we did not. We didn't do that. So what happened to me was, I was using the R5 constantly. In the winter was no problem, mostly real estate video tours. And then February, March came along and started getting warmer, and 18 degrees and 20 degrees. And as soon as it hit those days, my camera's on for a long time. It's not technically recording for a long time, but it's start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. And then I'd get to like an hour of, like, I'm maybe there for 90 minutes. I get there for about an hour, and then it overheats, and I can still record for a little bit. And then as soon as, it gets to the point that it actually won't let me record at all, and then shuts down completely. So okay, the first time that's fine. By time 9, it's kind of embarrassing as a professional for clients, and they all understand, but I'm a perfectionist and I don't understand, and I don't want to portray that, and I had to make a decision. So I did sell all my Fuji stuff and bought the R5C, and since I've been using that, not once has it overheated. I have the fan on max. So when it's not recording, the fan is just like, it's just coming through, and that's fine with me. I'd rather that and not have the other experience. I still use the R5, obviously. Those are now my 2 go-to cameras, and hopefully for years to come.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
next week. But
this technology it's just it should 5 years. We should still be happy with it.
I think so. And my whole goal is in the field. My whole goal in the field is to literally record 8K at all times. I know stock footage companies aren't accepting it at the moment, but as soon as they do, I've got all this 8K content ready to go. It's kind of my thought. And I've heard, Michael Morrow talk about that on Wild and Expose, and I had already, planned to do that anyway. So that kind of reaffirmed my, what I was doing. So that helped. But That's the goal anyway.
He's always preached the future proofing.
Yeah.
It's shoot in the best file type you can, integrity that lasts the longest. But
sure.
It's interesting though how much, for the high end BBC stuff, that makes total sense. They're going to always want the best for their clients. And, I hear the Japanese consumer markets now, 8K is the go-to for TVs over there and stuff. But it's interesting how much of the market is also going the other way, because all the media stuff, all the website stuff, all the video, you don't need anywhere near that for the sales for that purpose, so it's but obviously you can't repeat the events in wildlife, and nor does anybody want to, when they build a library, have to restart over again. So it makes sense to shoot it in the best file you can.
So Mark, I wanted to bring up your books. Talk about your books. I know you've got a new one coming out, but you currently have 2 books out there right now. Right there. You have one on moose and one on whitetails. We're going to have links below so people can take a look and see, where they can purchase your books. But tell us about your new one, your new book on caribou.
Yeah, it's been an amazing, fun project. Caribou have been, part of my life for the most of my career, as far as encountering them, photographing them, learning about them, experiencing them, and of course, as that evolves, caring more about them as well. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity to do essentially a sister book, in a sense, to the moose book. It's with the same publisher. It's the same size, same dimensions. We have more images in the caribou book. That's exciting, something different. There's 165 images and 160 pages. It's the same dimensions. It's in a crazy great price at $24.95. And I just have to say that because it's so affordable for what the package is. I co-authored the writing part with my wife, who has shared, we've worked together for the past, ever since we've been together. She's been my partner in business, and she has shared a lot of these adventures, more so in recent years with the kids being growing up. And so she's had some intimate time with caribou, and she's always been my best editor. And so
excellent.
We partnered on the writing with this book because of all kinds of great reasons. It was also a tight editorial time that we had to complete the project. We had enough time, but it was tight to do it. So it was great to work on it together. Mm-hmm. And it's coming out in mid-September of this year, 2022. I have the digital file of the book, but not in print. So as always, it's amazing as somebody who really is super passionate about wildlife, nature, planet mm-hmm. Earth, species as important and iconic as caribou. It's something that a lot of people, few people in our general population ever encounter caribou, but those that do, it's a magical experience. And, for wildlife nature photographers, it's phenomenal to witness, whether it's a small band of woodland caribou or a large herd of barren ground caribou. And one of the things that to do with the timeline of this book that was a little bit different than moose, but was absolutely fine and made it quite dynamic visually, was that in the moose book, I did all the photography, I think, except for 2 or 3 images. In this book, I think we sourced 18 images, maybe, for it. And part of that was when I communicated with the publisher and we got moving on the project, the conversation was it would be a book published in the fall of 2023. And we were planning to do a couple more trips because it's very important to me that at this point in time, just like for the moose book, it's not a competitive stance. It's more of just wanting the book to be the quintessential book on the species that we can offer right now. We want to do the mm-hmm. best job we can to cover every aspect of what caribou are, where caribou are, and make it a balance, a visually super appealing book. The pictures are what it's about, but the text really will serve to educate the readers about caribou, but designed in an entertaining way, like the Moose book, that have a lot of anecdotal stories field. And the concluding chapter is even about photographing caribou and tips and tactics and techniques and gear conversations and that kind of stuff, which is great for this audience. But it really takes people and gives them a sense of what the world of caribou, the circumpolar amazing species, what it's like, where it's at today, concerns of present time. So we sourced images. I didn't have aerials of expansive herds in the far north. I photographed lots of caribou from coast to coast in the far north, but never had the privilege to be in a plane over a herd doing research, having that opportunity. And so I work with a stock agent, have for a long time with a part of my portfolio. And so I sourced a lot of images through them, and then also some friends that had, I think it was you, Joe, that years ago introduced me to Jeanette Fraser. So
that's right. Yeah.
She's guiding in Svalbard, Norway right now, and has had some amazing experiences with polar bears. But something that's been changing with that population of polar bears with climate change, that's piquing a lot of interest. And she's, it's funny, she offered this great image to just illustrate this for the book. But yeah, she's collected some even more imagery and stories since this has happened of polar bears preying on reindeer. Now, reindeer and caribou are the same species. We call them caribou in North America. The Scandinavians call them reindeer. So with the sea ice issues and the potential of that, what polar bears, some of them anyway, have been driving caribou into the water. And when they're swimming, the bear can catch the caribou. And when it does, catches the caribou and brings it back to shore and consumes it. And so she's witnessed this. It's been documented in news media, but it's happening more and more, which is interesting. Modern day development, or at least that's what we as observers are recognizing. And then Simone Heinrich from Alberta, the Tonquin Valley herd was another thing. I would have loved to have had time to go up and document this endangered small herd in Jasper National Park and do the time frame. It just wasn't possible. And Simone, there are a couple of her wonderful images in the book to illustrate those. So we've Eric Brewer, a great friend of mine, a photographer, spent some time with some in northern British Columbia, some mountain caribou, and we used a couple of his images, one with a radio collar as well, to illustrate, some of the research that's being done in the caribou conservation and future chapter. And even as far back as, I never met Michio Hoshino, a fantastic photographer who was capturing the, quintessential environmental portraits back in the day before anybody else that I recognized or knew of he was known for that. He's passed away a number of years ago, unfortunately, but we have a few of his book or images. One really interesting one where it illustrates how the herd in late spring, in the far north, in the porcupine herd, we're on an ice, like a patch of snow on a mountainside. And you can see there might be a couple of animals off the snow. It's a distant shot, but most of the herd's on the snow because it's cooler and there are fewer insects there for that period of time.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's great.
So, just discussing what the world of caribou in the far north is like, those challenges. There's such seasonal fluctuations, and they're an incredible species. And so it was a wonderful project to do, and we're super excited for it to come out. And it's available at any bookseller, and the price point is
it's crazy. That's crazy. $25 for a book.
Right.
For that caliber.
That's
unheard of. That's awesome. I can't wait to get my signed copy this fall. So why don't we just segue into talking about caribou, you're doing a workshop with caribou.
Photo tours.
Photo tours, yeah.
Tours.
It could be /workshop. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's the first year doing it. I've been so I've had a tremendous amount of time in Alaska. One of my places that is soul food for me. I've had maybe about 15 trips there, and did 10 of those were interior Alaska camping trips, and had a tremendous experience with barren ground caribou there. A lot in Denali National Park, amazing place to be as a nature wildlife photographer. It's something, if anybody listening's up to doing it, it's something to consider a place to go. Just even that part of Alaska, wildlife side, to see it and experience it. But I mean, you guys live in you're very close to wildlife wilderness heaven as it is where you are in Alberta too. But in 2002, I started traveling to Newfoundland and working with the government there on assignments, and have over the years. Back then, I mean, the moose population was crazy. I mean, as a wildlife photographer, they were everywhere, and that's changed. The moose population is certainly still solid, but they're not, and people going there are apt to see them, but not around every corner or every tree as it once was. And woodland caribou have always been on my assignment list to try and photograph for the government there when I traveled. And I went most years, not every year, but have traveled to all different areas in Newfoundland, and our destinations have changed as time has changed, and available subjects, and some of it was remote fly-in stuff. But we've, past 5 years, we missed 1 year because of COVID. Without a place in Newfoundland, we were not permitted to go. So what strange times, but I'm so happy we can now be out and travel and do these things again. So we've found a population that has been wonderful to work with. And so we're sharing it with our clients. This is the first year, and we're offering 2 weeks, but I'm sorry to say it's sold out. Thankfully,
excellent.
Sold out very quickly, but we've already begun taking names for 2023, and it's honestly a really grounding experience, and because there are a lot of moose in this area, and there are other wildlife species as well, and just the landscape is very ancient and fundamental, and it just is one of the most calming environments that I experience. And I think that's what draws me back year after year. And we were there for a month last year. Pilly joined me for 2 weeks of it, and it was fantastic. I mean, there was nobody else with us in it, and not that it has to be that way, but it was just so quiet.
Sure.
And so peaceful. And it's just a great opportunity. It's interesting too. We have a variety, we have most of our clients are very enthusiastic and experienced photographers, but there are some that are coming that aren't even really photographers, but just want to spend time with caribou, because life is, we have so many days, and how cool would that be on this planet to have a week in the company of caribou and witness their behaviors. And there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of fun in it. And another thing about Newfoundland is the variable weather. You can create, there's a tremendous amount of potential for varied experience in 7 days there, from fog to
100%. Yeah.
Frost, you name it, in autumn. So yeah, we're super excited. It's the first year. So, but yeah, we can't wait. I have a variety of trips planned this year, but that's the one that I am most looking forward to. Also, just to share it and plant the seed of, tremendous respect and admiration for caribou and for Newfoundland and wilderness. And I'll just get on a tiny little soapbox for just a minute and say that, one thing I personally feel nowadays, and I think it's common, we're inundated with so much negative news all the time. It's hard, we're just following news, and our mind I feel like my mind at times is more preoccupied than it's ever been in my life with thoughts that, and obviously some of these are shouldn't take up much of my mind's time because I cannot control any outcome of it. I mean, and it's just so much negative news, and it's something we need to be cognizant of and be aware of what's happening and care about and act about things if we can. But we also need time to disconnect from that. And I think that's one of the best aspects right now about being photographers. You know, hikers experience it. Any canoeing does it. Camping does it. Basically, being in nature does it, where you are focused on the present, on the moment. And photography especially channels that between, through our equipment. That being said, put the equipment down at times and just take it in. But, it's nature therapy, because at the end of that day, or group of days, even better, I am way calmer, way significantly more centered and compassionate. There's so many things that it just calms down. It's like a spa, right? I mean, I haven't had many privileges of that, but but it's in a way that feeds our passion too. Mm-hmm. We're driven to experience it. But how often do you finish watching that grizzly bear walk down that slope? I saw it on your post. It's fantastic today. Drink that water. And at the end of it, you just sit back and go, that breath comes out. That's amazing. And then you just live 100%. So that's something I'm relishing most about the idea of doing photo tours, taking people out of their busy lives, this distracted lives, the negative components of so much crazy news, and putting them in the wild safely with us to experience something wonderful. And in Canada, there's lots to experience. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love watching the monarch butterfly life cycle that's happening right now, and imagining these fresh butterflies and the journey ahead of them, just magnificent. But there is something about it just right away about being in the company of caribou. It's so removed from the world that most of us live in that it just takes us back. It makes us, it just calm. It's so calming. Even just, you'd think that they're clicking hooves walking past, and it is really truly audible. I mean, it's like, oh, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And then the behaviors, you've got the antler cycle, the rut, all the action, and they're truly charismatic animals. So it's a great environment. So that's what encouraged us to try this new venture, was the sharing aspect. And I'm extremely confident that those who are aspiring to come away with a significant portfolio will do so. And in those that are just going to relish the experience because of their age and current philosophy in life will come away, appreciating that that's part of their life's history, a time with caribou. So, yeah,
we have a couple of friends going, Mark, and I mean, that's all they're talking about. So,
is that right?
Anxious to hear anxious to see what they come back with and their experiences and everything else. So yeah, it'll be good. Can't wait to hear that. So caribou, I know you talked about a lot about caribou, but before we start wrapping things up, is caribou your favorite subject? I know this is hard when you ask a wildlife photographer. What is your favorite thing to photograph? And I'm assuming it's ungulates, but I mean, I'm not sure. Like, is it, or are they all as important as, with your biology background, or, what, if you had to pick one, how's that? Let's put the pressure on.
I can't pick one. I have different chapters in my life where I still have as much thrill. And this is a funny thing, after all these years, honestly, I don't like editing tens of thousands of pictures. I like the end results of some of them, but it's the field time is still as much a thrill as it was when I was in my late teens. Have that experience, to witness it and just be part of it. And it doesn't matter which species. I mean, I think it boils down to, I mean, clearly large North American mammals are what I am most driven to photograph, but I love everything about, I mean, we have a great horned owlet who just squawks all night long outside our window here. And it's great. And we have a nickname for him, and where is he tonight? Every aspect of it, even like fungi in the forest, salamanders, it's all what I appreciate. But as a photographer, I have a niche that my business has been built around, and I personally, I can't do it all. And there's so much skill set to doing different subject matter, different species, different types of nature, that I've been one of the people who's just focused on this type of fauna and creating a variety of compositional portfolio around those species. But I wouldn't pick a favorite. They all, whether I end up spending a day with a caribou or a moose, I've yet to experience muskox. I can't, that's something I would love to do and look forward to, just because of the ancient history of that species. Bears, wolves, an encounter with a wolf is always, you feel it right to the core, So I don't have a favorite. It's more of just being out there. And part of it now at this stage of my career is significant portion of what I do is in places where I'm by myself, but there are also trips where I'm not. And the social network with great people like you guys, that is on those trips as much about it too, because, there's such similar passions and engaging conversation and great times. It's fun, right? To share.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a big enjoyment too. And I people, odd time people say, if they come by the house, they'll say, what's your favorite image? It's like, what's your favorite? I don't, I'm grateful and feel, privileged to work in this field and to be able to work in a visual medium that I enjoy, and to create this. I don't have a favorite, but caribou, the chapter, I mean, like I said, I've been working with caribou ever since my very first trip to the north, and I have great stories and fun around many of them. They're a funny animal, right? I mean,
they're funny looking. Like, if you really think about moose are too, but anyways, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, for sure.
Look at their big antlers. I mean, my first trip with caribou was on a professional photography permit in Denali National Park, a program they had. I was at that time, the permit program only allowed eventually to take one other person with you. But at that time, in my first permit, you could take any number of family members and one other person. I don't know. So I had my brother and this photographer friend that with me on my first trip. And we were about 80 miles back in the park, and we glassed a bull moose. 3 didn't work, by the way. It was space-wise, it didn't work. It was better with 2 anyway for these trips for 2 weeks and common, sleeping arrangements, all that stuff. But we glassed this, not a big bull moose, but the settings there are just magnificent. So it's like anything you go. So we hike out to it, and it was just out of velvet, I think that one was, but it was maybe a 2-year-old bull. And we rounded this willow thicket, and the terrain there, I mean, like a lot of the north is wide open. I mean, there are pockets of spruce forest and lowland areas, but there's a lot of taiga forest where it just is open, and you can see for kilometers or miles with binoculars, but it's deceptive because it looks like you can see. But when you start walking, that terrain undulates incredibly. I mean, there could be so many animals of significant size in that landscape. Like, where's Waldo? Good luck.
Yeah.
They do pop up, and if you just wait and glass, things happen. But anyway, so we hiked down to this moose and around the corner, and there was this other photographer there. It's like, what are the odds? Wait, there's so there. I forget at that time if there were 5 or 10 permits at any one time, but in a 90-mile park, you don't usually see people very often. You will once in a while, but the odds of hiking out, and he was there anyway. And the photographer with me said, well, maybe we should go up because he was here first. I'm like, this is such a rare opportunity, and we will not, get in his way whatsoever, but we're also on permit, and this is my job. We only have so many days. What if it rains the next 3? Let's go. And we went up behind the other photographer, and it turns out I knew him. Oh. And just to show you the camaraderie, I mean, it's a competitive business, obviously. And he worked with a lot of the same clients I did, but he also recognized, all these clients work with a certain number of photographers for varying style or just different geographic areas for species, or also it's just, no one photographer can supply everything necessarily. So he was very friendly and a good friend of mine. But it was interesting. We rounded the corner, and it's still to this day the biggest bull moose I've ever seen was around out of sight. And so we photographed this bull with him, and the bull bedded down, and it was quiet for a while. And he, over conversation, realized it was my first time there. And I'd have to look back at the year. I mean, it was 20 years ago. And he said, have you done any caribou yet? I said, no. He said, well, there are 3 bulls, maybe 2 miles away, bedded on a ridge. Do you want to go? I'm like, yes, let's
wow.
And so he shared that, and we hiked up there, and the bulls were, so, approaching wildlife, always respecting their space. But we do it in a way that we try to play the wind, also not approach them directly. And so by the time we got within 100 yards of the caribou, they were well accustomed to us and clearly didn't care about us because they didn't even get up. And it was dark and drizzly. And then just this narrow shaft of clouds, light came through the clouds as they parted just for a few minutes. One of my favorite scenarios where you have these dark, broody clouds as the backdrop, but the subject's illuminated. So, and with the bloody antlers on this bull caribou and the dreadlocks of velvet, I mean, it's a short window, right? That they shed velvet. You're looking at probably 2 days and sometimes less because it's irritating for them. As cool as they look, they don't like it because they're a prey species, and it hinders their vision, hinders their hearing, and they're flapping around with the velvet. So they rub it off on the shrubbery. But to capture that on my first trip with caribou was just an incredible opportunity. And I owe it, to the fact another photographer shared it. And in that light scenario, for that few minutes was incredible. And that's one thing about filming in the mountains, that is, the dramatic change in weather and in lighting for photography or videography is tremendous fun, because it can be pouring rain and then all of a sudden the skies open up. It seems like it's going to pour rain for hours, but that transition happens surprisingly fast. And some of the lighting opportunities can be incredibly dramatic. And whether it's landscape, obviously, or with an animal in a landscape, those can be highlight experiences for an entire career. So
100%.
I got a question for you, Mark. Joe and I have been actually talking about this recently. Obviously there's ideal lighting times in the morning and night, but when you're shooting video, do you ever, most people put their cameras away and go have lunch or whatever, and then come back out later on. When you're filming video, do you ever decide that, I'm just going to stay out here and capture it because I want to capture the behavior no matter what the lighting is? Or are you still on the video side, still focusing on that light?
Video is still secondary to stills. I do a lot of it, but my visual training has always been, and still to this day, about quality of light. That's what, composition and subject matter are very important, but what differentiates a consistently top-notch product is the quality of light. And that's variable. I mean, there's all kinds of situations where light works exceptionally well, from overcast light to light at the beginning or end. A go-to on sunny days is the first 3 hours of the day and the last 3 hours, but it depends on the season and how far north you are. All that changes too. So for me, it's still light is always number one if I'm recording something that I hope to market. The only exception would be, and usually things get packed up or or just simply wait it out and take in where we are, have a snack and sit down and have some blueberries and
Sure.
wild blueberries on the hike. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, light is paramount for me. But if something happened,
You're still
camera's
going to
on.
capture it. Yeah.
Yeah. Behavior that's really unusual, then that doesn't, the light, then I'll still work with it. But it's, one of the things that was ingrained in my training early on as a photographer through friends who were doing well professionally was about light. So, and that's hasn't changed, but the versatility working with light now has in post with digital photography.
Oh yeah.
The capabilities from when you get your raw file to what goes out with, dodge and burn tools and stuff. That is just, it's a lot of fun. And not that I take any situation far from the norm, but sometimes it helps bring it closer to what happened. Like I posted a moose yesterday in crossing a river in the Rocky Mountains, and I took the dodge burn tool across the water, so it wasn't as bright to bring the animal up a little bit, but it made the water more edgy, and it was like that, but the camera, with the what's the terminology, with the breadth of what it can capture,
Dynamic range,
necessarily nail it all, right? So that's a whole other thing. And there are landscape photographers who I admire and who are, renowned professionals who do amazing things in post, right? So,
that's for sure.
Yeah, but light is, to me, it's the most powerful tool of the image, assuming the subject matter, whether it's an animal or landscape, and the composition are appealing. The difference maker is the light. And a lot of people, are certainly drawn to the best light, but, it's something that people starting out, if they really want to continue to improve their images, have to pay attention to, the subtlety of even catch light in an animal's eye.
100%. Yeah, you bet.
That's number one, but it's just the quality of light, the angle, but some of the dynamic range of what the cameras can capture now with backlighting or side lighting is so much better. It's not as, for lack of a better term, black and white as film used to be. So to be able to play with some shadows and bring out some detail just to make that image, that much more visually appealing, which our eye might have been able to do, as we were looking at it. But the cameras back in the day with various film settings or even digital had their sensor limitations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, something that would have been the silhouette, now you can easily bring out as a, usable image, I mean, the extremes may not be that much, but I understand exactly what you're saying. And that R5, the range on that camera is insane. I mean, I photographed a backlit eagle, and when I got it into my into Lightroom, I was expecting a silhouette, and there was detail in the feathers. Like there was detail everywhere. I'm like, wow! It just blew my mind what I thought I was going to get versus what I actually got. So yeah, 100% agree with you there. So
that's an argument for better gear too. People who are serious, it does make a difference. Professional glass makes a difference as well, to me anyway.
You bet.
Yep.
But of course, everybody's got to decide, how much of a hobby and a lifestyle this is.
Yeah, do I need that new compact car or do I need that new lens?
That's why I don't have the lens.
Week in the tropics, or it's interesting. I think about that with the photo tour stuff. I'm meeting more people, and one of the ways I rationalize it is, everybody's got, as far as why people there's many reasons why they do it, but people can choose where they spend their free time each year.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people choose to be in, not compared to the cruise lines, obviously. I
Mm-hmm.
prefer, the wildlife situation, and more and
Yeah.
more people. So would you spend your time, traveling to another part of the world, spending your money and time on your vacation doing that? Or do you spend it, on a photo tour somewhere to experience, spirit bears? You've never had
Mm-hmm.
that experience, or polar bears.
Mm-hmm.
It costs money, either because the accommodations are already there, but the whole process is streamlined, right? So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have their 7 days. They can't learn the lay of the land, learn the behavioral rhythms of the animals they're interested in pursuing in that amount of time. And so it's worth it to streamline the experience to do these. And I think more and more aspiring photographers, but also people who are just interested in these natural experiences, are choosing to do that for their time. Maybe there's
Yeah.
Anyway,
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more.
The
For sure.
experience, yeah, that's for sure.
Well, Mark, I have one last question for you before we kind of wrap things up here.
six.
Six more? Okay.
No, I thought a number between 1 and 10. I'm sorry.
One. What advice would you give somebody starting out, in photography who wanted to make it a career? I've heard mixed questions, like, or mixed answers, like get a business degree, and learn photography, or learn photography and then take a small like course in business, or like a lot of people have different answers. I was kind of on the side of I thought it made really good sense is to actually go to school or take business courses to understand how to run a profitable business and learn photography, either with a mentor or courses. I mean, there's so many other avenues to do that, but just curious because you started. Well, basically, I would say you're pretty hardcore. Like you just dove in and said, I'm going to make a career of this, and you're going to learn as you go, right? You didn't have the resources that we have today, with courses and videos and YouTube and all this kind of stuff. So, what would you recommend, or what words of advice would you give somebody that wanted to start out?
Well, there's always, things in life, and no matter what career or any aspect of life, there's always luck and good fortune, right time, right place, things that happen. And commitment is a big part of it, and recognizing one's passion and trying as hard as one can to continually improve. But also I think there's a lot of stress nowadays on people. And I think if somebody's starting out, if somebody truly enjoys photography, make sure that they don't put too much pressure on themselves and they enjoy what they're doing to keep it enjoyable. The business model side of it, it's constantly changing. This landscape in the past decade has changed as much as any other profession I can think of. There's still traditional applications, and photography is so tremendously broad. It's mind-boggling where people can generate revenue with imagery. And nowadays, I think there's a lot of chance for multimedia applications, not just still photography, for people
that's right,
to be skilled across a variety of platforms that way. But it's just what feeds a soul, and to go for it. But it's the landscape is very different from when I started to now. And so how I started would be considered very traditional ways. It had been that way for a long time, as far as stock photography and editorial clients, but now it's much more dramatic, and the editorial side's changed. It doesn't exist nearly as robustly as it did 20 years ago. There's still applications for it. It still exists. There's still good clients, 100% for that, but it's not as broad an opportunity as it once was.
Mhm.
But that's being said, there are other ways to generate revenue off photography or visual media now that didn't exist back then. The business model side is important, but I think that would apply to any type of venture that people took on. You need to be savvy and smart about that. And I mean, I haven't tried to research, some of maybe the modern nuances about how to get into it and what's normal, because I still work with a lot of my clients that I have for years and years. And I mean, new ones come up, but I know I'm running around the bush here a bit on this answer. I still say 6.
Oh, no.
6 is the
6.
But it's to keep it enjoyable. It's like you guys are describing with your podcast. You never know when something can take off. But you want to have fun with it at the same time. And constantly learning about anything in our lives. I mean, that's something that people should aspire to. And it's, sometimes a challenge to do, but, we all grow from it. So if photography is your thing, to make a business at it, it's just a matter of researching what's viable or what opportunities are there where you are. But it's more of a global marketplace too. So there are opportunities in other countries that didn't exist. The communication wasn't there.
100%.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Cool.
Do you want to narrow that down at all?
It's all good, Mr. Mark. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. So
it's a tough go, but it's doable. And there's certainly areas in photography that are as lucrative as they were 20 years ago. In wildlife photography or nature photography, it's a bit of a tougher go than it was back then. I don't think as many people tried as hard back then.
Oh, okay.
There weren't a lot of openings, but you really had to build a portfolio of significance, and the whole landscape was very different than now. I think it's still important to have a strong portfolio before knocking on any doors.
Yeah.
Because, and this is something, I mean, this is going old school, but it might still apply. If you get a client because you have something out of this world that blows them away visually and they purchase it, you want to have more of those because you want to keep that client. The bills don't stop after the one sale. We have to keep paying bills. So to have a deep enough portfolio that when you do land a client, that you can continue to supply them as you continue to build and collect new images, but not just a one and done or a two and done, to wait a bit until you have the portfolio. And, I've talked about it before. I mean, people can start that without big grand trips, those people who are affluent, who can do, 5 trips to world destinations and do their 10 days and create the portfolio, but you still need a skill set. To do, right? And the camera gear, you need to know it like a tool. It's an amazing technological tool, but you have to be very comfortable with using it to make the most of your time and investment in the travels too. So it's fun though, right? And it
has to be.
It's great. I mean, but it's to me, they're very, and everybody's different, obviously, but the audience would obviously lean toward loving experiences in the outdoors, wilderness. And to me, so a photographer, a fellow who I've known for a while but don't know really well, contacted me a few weeks ago. He just bought an R7 and thinking about getting into photography because he loves the outdoors. And he said to me, well, Mark, you have so many pictures of moose. Why do you keep going to do moose? And, I take a step back and I'm like, you're right. I really don't need any more moose pictures, but the camera is the vessel that gets me there. And, my wife, we have these once in a while surface into these philosophical talks. It's like, why do we do this or that? And would I go on these trips if I wasn't collecting imagery? Would you just go and sit there? And I love sitting there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love being in the element. And, when the animal is resting and we're 60 yards away, just being in the elements, some of my favorite time. It's just incredibly calming. But would I do it without a camera? Probably not. So these trips, the idea, the desire to collect video storytelling that we can share with other people, family, friends, aspiring photographers, people who may not appreciate or know much about caribou or moose or bears or the worlds they live in and why that's important. The camera is the end product, but the reason, it gives me the reason to go as well. And what's most important is being there. Mm-hmm. So even though I've done this for so long and have, somewhat of a moose portfolio per se, I still love being there and am as excited as the first time when I'm in that element. So there's that to think about. If people are getting into photography, is why they do it. And photography is a tool that gives them the experience. And that experience is one of the ways that they feel fulfilled in life.
Excellent.
Great answer. Yeah.
Great answer for sure. Well, Mark, we're going to wrap things up, I think, here. And like we said at the beginning, we really, really appreciate you joining us. It was a pleasure, an honor. Can't wait for your Caribou book to come out. Wish you all the luck and success on your new wildlife tours, your Caribou tours. And I'm sure we will have you on again. Especially with next year with the Z9 comparison thing. We'll see.
I heard a bit of a review there, yeah.
If we don't hear him screaming from way over there.
Yeah.
The gear is always fun. It's always fun to see what new technology can do.
It is.
And how it changes things. So, yeah. But it's been fun being on. And like I said,
excellent.
I love what you guys do. I love the energy you guys bring to your show, to your podcast, to the YouTube stuff, to the shorts you do. And you're such pleasant guys, and you can clearly feel through your product, through these podcasts, how much you enjoy it, and you dive in. You share your learning experience with your audience in an entertaining way. So it's fun to be here, and I appreciate you guys having me on. And thanks for being such cool dudes and putting the moose here behind you.
And again, folks, there'll be links at the end of the video there.
It was so funny to see that in the beginning. I joke that I'm going to be watching future episodes to see if they're still. Anyway, I'm grateful, and they're fun projects, and it's been
Excellent.
fun being on here, and I will continue to look forward to your content as well.
Excellent. Well,
thanks so
really
much, Mark.
appreciate
That's
it, Mark.
great. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk to you again.
And before you run the bloopers, you're going to show me, right?
What bloopers?
What? We don't make mistakes.
Exactly. Awesome.
Polished. Sweet. Take care, guys.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
We'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you in the field at some point.
Oh, you betcha.
You bet you will.
Look forward to it. All right.
Alrighty, we'll see ya.
Thanks for joining us on the Nature Photo Guys podcast. If you have any questions, contact us at info@thenaturePhotoGuys.ca or message us on Facebook and Instagram at the Nature Photo Guys Podcast. Visit YouTube and subscribe to our channel to watch all our latest videos. Or follow and listen to our latest podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on our website at thenaturePhotoGuys.ca. We'll catch you next time on the Nature Photo Guys Podcast.